We ready?
1 second, it's just loading. One minute. Alrighty, yep, good to go.
All right. I'd like to open this meeting of the planning board for October 26, 2020 at 7 p.m. Mr. Planner, we're going to call you. Is that correct?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Would you like to read the remote disclaimer, please?
You got it. So, in response to Governor Baker's declaration of a public health emergency and the related emergency executive order dated March 12th, 2012, I'm sorry, 2020, the Everett Planning Board shall be meeting remotely until further notice. The audio conferencing application Zoom will be used for this purpose. An online link and telephone access number will be provided on all meeting agendas and also on the city's website. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the city's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. This application will permit the public to access and participate in future board meetings and hearings. Instructions for joining meetings in this manner will be provided on the city and city clerk's websites. We extend our thanks for your understanding and participation in this matter, which is intended to keep members of the board and the public.
Could you call the roll of attendance, please?
You got it.
Matt?
Frederick Cafasso.
Chairman Cafaso's here.
Michael O'Connor.
Yeah.
Leo Pisano.
Yeah.
George D'Angelo. Not seeing or hearing George. Cheyenne Rangel. Not seeing or hearing Cheyenne. Philip Mastrocola.
I'm here.
James Tarr.
Here.
And I'll just note as well that Philip Mastrocola and James Tarr, due to the absences of George D'Angelo and Cheyenne Rangel, so the two alternates will become members for this meeting, full participating and voting members. We do have a quorum.
Thank you. Could you read the first order of business, please?
First order of business is old business. Number 1, site plan review, dimensional special permits and inclusionary zoning special permits, 1690 Revere Beach Parkway. It's a proposal to build 800 transit-oriented development residential units with 15,000 square feet of commercial space, 5,000 square feet located in Chelsea, with 3 of the buildings in Everett and 1 in Chelsea, as shown on plans entitled, quote, proposed site documents for Grossman Companies, Inc., proposed mixed-use development, end quote, on a parcel shown on the site plan being a parcel of land referenced by Assessor's Department as K0-04-00084, located in the Commercial Triangle Economic Development District.
Thank you. Are the proponents here?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is David O'Neill. I represent the applicant Everett Holdings LLC. We're back for another meeting with the planning board, and present is the development team headed by the Grossman Companies principal with Jake Grossman on the line, along with Paul Dawson and Avi Shoss of the Grossman Companies. And we've been, as your packets and your review of the file at the planning board will show you, or the planning department will show you, that the team has been busy in the last couple of weeks since our last appearance with some revised submissions and some additional information that the board had inquired about in earlier meetings. So let me just introduce what the bill of fare that we're going to present to you, and obviously responsive to your questions throughout. But we're going to hear from our principal architect, Joel Bargeman of BH+A, review of the project. And let me just jump back for a moment and recognize that we've got, or introduce ourselves to Greg St. Louis and Matt Latanzi, who are working as planning staff, known, of course, to all of us but welcome here to wear yet additional hats. And Greg, I thought you were sending us a message there with your icon of the DPW hat, but we'll get you a planning hat too to put up there with that. So thank you guys, and we're pleased to see you here wearing those different hats. But in addition to getting a review for you from Joel Bargman with the new developments and some project overview, addressing the questions and giving us some more information on materials and surfaces, we're also going to hear from Steve Moderano of Bowler Engineering with some information responsive to the inquiries and input from the board of prior meetings, specifically the entry from Revere Beach Parkway. I know that Steve and Zach Richard from Bowler have done some work on that. Their contact with the fire department, and I know they put together a pretty comprehensive site utilization plan to show how this project is hopefully going to roll out and in conjunction with the inspection services. I know we've also got Sean Kelly from Vanas Associates to respond to some of the traffic and transportation questions that have come from the board. And his responses will be, of course, informed by his analysis and responses to the peer review done by Carrie Pike and the staff at Howard Stein Hudson, who I see are on the call as well. We've also got Lynn Sweet, our affordable housing consultant. And I know that we've had a significant presentation from her last week, or last meeting, and in regard to our special permit for inclusionary zoning, the affordable housing component of this 800 unit project, which, as we've previously noted, is located on a site that is subject to an activity and use limitation. So those 40 affordable spots being 5% of the total. Actually, hopefully we can get to a vote on that subject. I think we were ready maybe at the last meeting. Finally, we'll be moving forward to seeing what our next hearing might produce and with the direction of the board. But before I turn it over to Joel, I wanted to introduce formally, and I know you've heard from him in the hallway chatter with Avi Shas from the Grossman Companies. Avi, if you can just introduce us to the.
I'm on. Thanks, David. So thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Welcome, Matt and Greg. Nice to see you guys. As the last two meetings, we're still excited. We have a lot of answers to the questions that the board's raised over the last two meetings. I believe we shared those in written form, but each of our consultants will go through questions that are specific to their trade, as kind of a recap through the project, as Dave mentioned in our agenda. And we do appreciate being moved up in the lineup to the #1 spot. We will attempt to still keep it short, even though we know it's a light agenda tonight, but we'll move through it quickly. If you have questions, please jump in. I think the more discussion, the better. And with that, I will turn it over to Joel.
Great, thank you. I'm going to share the screen. Are folks seeing the opening slide now? Is our cover sheet showing up on everybody's computer?
Yep.
Great, thank you. My name is Joel Bargman with BH Fossé. As Avi mentioned, I wanted to specifically address the comments and questions that had come up. I also wanted to take the opportunity to go through the Everett design guidelines with regards to the regulation of the planning board regarding compliance with the design guidelines. And specifically, those are sections B and C that reflect the urban design and the building design, and just make sure that we've covered those we do not believe that waivers are required, and we'd like to close out that portion of the architectural discussion. As you recall, the site is the site of the Stop and Shop, bordered by the gas station on Everett and Revere Beach Parkway. Revere Beach Parkway on one direct side of the site, Boston Street, Vale Street, and then Locust is the street that's between this project 1690 and the Fairfield project that's completing construction now to the south. As I mentioned, the statistics have not changed for the project. The site, this is just a direct site to orient you with the site plans that have been prepared. So Everett Avenue is on the left, Revere Beach Parkway is on the diagonal right-hand side. And this is our site plan, which you had seen with 3 buildings, building 1 on Revere Beach Parkway and Boston Street, and building 2 on Vale Street and Locust, and then building 3 abuts the Shell oil station and the auto service facilities on the left side of the site, and Locust Street on the top side of the site. So there are 3 buildings. The 3 buildings form a common outdoor space. We call it a smart street, other terms used for it, but it involves pedestrians, automobiles, public safety vehicles. We'll show you how those can access, and it includes a bike path, which is the orange line connecting Revere Beach Parkway through this smart street area, the courtyard, onto Locust Street, and then to Vale. This was some pictures that show you what these Von Erfs type streets, these mixed-use type streets can offer. It's a very pedestrian oriented and consciously vehicle slowed space, sort of organizing the 3 buildings. So I mentioned we'll go through the guidelines. The first thing we've done is we submitted a context map, which was not in our initial submission. The context map shows the important facilities around the site, but more specifically, it sets us up for how the building responds to the context of the particular site. And as you know, the site's undeveloped for the most part, other than Pioneer, the Wendy's, and the Valvoline shop, and the Shell shop, with the new apartments coming up behind it. But the context of the site is also pedestrian and vehicular oriented. So you'll see how we're making some very conscious connections between the site that have to do with vehicular bicycle circulation to connect Vale Street and Revere Beach Parkway in a very interesting and sort of cumulative manner that reinforces the pedestrian and the bike and the automobile traffic. What that connection shows, and I'll go back to the site plan for that, is that that connection provides a very direct access from this side of the building to Vale, to the commuter rail. There also happen to be 2 other lobbies for building 1 and 2, which is another one of the design criteria. Buildings to discharge into Vale Street and then connect to the commuter rail in the most simple manner. The other through block connection connects Vale Street on the podium level with 2 stairs connecting street level to the podium level, going across the site in this direction, which again is not only for light and air for the buildings, but it creates another pedestrian connection from the building to Vale Street to the commuter rail. So if we go through the context B1, we think the site plan in a very clear and exciting way has addressed the context issue. Additionally, the context asks us to address specific accentuated corners, which I'll show you in the perspectives and I had shown you previously. We have accentuated the corner of Vale and Boston, Locust and Vale, Revere Beach Parkway, and then we've created a center section on Vale Street that's intended to break up the length of Vale and creates a crosswalk, a connection to the new Woodwaste development that Greystar is involved with. So there's a connection across Vale Street and a connection up Vale Street. So the crux of our communication here is we believe that we've fulfilled all the requirements of the context section B1. And I also have dwelled on B2, which are the mid-block connections, which we also believe that we comply with according to the guidelines. That the mid-block connections are there to provide safe and convenient access for pedestrians and bicycles. And then they coincidentally make a really nice connection to the more vehicular-oriented, car-oriented Revere Beach Parkway. And those connections, as required, provide the shortest distance between transit stops and our tenants. This slide also shows you design guideline B3, open space requirement. The site is required to have 15% open space. You can see with the two center courtyards between building 1, the courtyard in building 2, and then the courtyard between those two buildings, as well as our Smart Street Boner, what we call the courtyard space between the 3 buildings, we're in far excess of the open space requirement for the project. The project includes the public setbacks, plazas, pedestrian connections, all integrated with the landscape. So here you have the landscape on Vale Street connecting you to the activities on Vale Street, and our pedestrian connection from the plaza level happens to be a commercial restaurant location. So our open space design really connects with the accentuated corner and with the mid-block connection, we think, in a very successful and strong manner. We've also located some pavilions and kiosks and other public accessible facilities. The main one is here on the corner of Locust and Vale Street. The second one is an outdoor pavilion courtyard on Vale Street in the middle of our property. And then, of course, the entire center courtyard is an open managed space. And as I mentioned in the opening, your section B4 is complete streets. We talk about that as a smart street, interchangeable terms. But the goal is that the project should provide facilities for people to safely walk, bicycle, drive, take transit, and socialize in a manner appropriate to the context. And what we're most excited as, I think, the development team and the design team is really having a project that makes that connection between what is a pretty busy Revere Beach Parkway and creates sort of the anchor or the keystone of the industrial district, and then begins to make the transition to the Greystar development, other projects that we saw last week, the Vine on 2nd Street, et cetera, going back further into the district. But this is really sort of the corner, the keystone site of that project. And we believe that the streets make the appropriate connection. And we've designed bicycle facilities to go through the street. We've designed bicycle parking areas in this courtyard area. There is a blue bike, 15 bike rack there for rental blue bikes. And inside the building, we have parking facilities that are located right in the front. It's easy to get into the parking facilities as it is to get into the garage for cars. And we have the requisite number of temporary bike facilities on the site. excuse me, programmatically, I'm now in section C1. It is a residential property. The residential is encouraged in section C1 as a balance of use residential mixed use. This is the entry coming with building 1 on the right, building 3 on the left, and building 2 straight down with the private street, courtyard, drop-off area, and more private areas within the space. You'll see that ground floors of the building comply with section C2 that asks you as an architect to enliven the public realm, creating interesting pedestrian journeys, ensure privacy for residential uses, and screen service areas from public streets and parks. You'll see more in my further direction about materials and where gas meters may go to be hidden from the street side of the site as well. The primary entry to the site is right here, building 1, right here, building 3, and then right there, building 2. So granted, the main entry to building 2 is not on Revere Beach Parkway. It's visible from and very strongly related to the parkway, but building 1 and 3 have strong entries. And as I mentioned, both building 2 and building 1 have major secondary lobbies on Vale Street, which is the public street. So we again believe that our property complies with C2. C3 is massing. The building massing shall contribute to a sense of place by framing public spaces and creating harmony between the buildings. That's very much what we try to do between these 3 buildings, create a new public space where we're inviting the community in. This is not a private gated community. This is an open space where we're hoping retail, restaurant, other facilities will draw folks from Everett by bicycle, by automobile, by other means, pedestrians into this space. So we believe that the massing is very much in compatibility with C3. The buildings have courtyards within themselves, which is a requirement of daylighting, section C of C3, and our buildings are articulated in the 60-foot increments that are required by the guidelines. I mentioned the parking. The parking is underneath the first 2 floors of the building, and the podium is articulated from the space above, which is another one of the design guidelines. We have bicycle parking in this Boner space, the public smart street, and right in this area here is an entry to the interior bike storage, bike parking area that's in the parking garage. All parking is interior to the site. We do have a small area of surface parking in the site plan that is to service that restaurant public space on the corner of Vale and Locust Street. So that's the purpose of the outdoor surface parking. And quickly here, C5 of your guidelines discusses amenity spaces shall be provided by multifamily buildings designed for social interaction. The building 1 would require, according to the guidelines, approximately 8,750 square feet of indoor and outdoor amenity space. Between our outdoor amenity space on the courtyard and 15,000 square foot of indoor amenity space, we have more than 3 times the required amenity space for the guidelines, and that's consistent with building 2 and building 3. All of them will meet that minimum of 25 square feet per dwelling unit, by far excess. The roofs of the buildings, you can see the buildings are of different heights. The building's edges are articulated, even building 2 and building 1 have some different heights to them, which is again a requirement of the guidelines. Parts of the roof are flat because we do have roof decks on the roof, and we do have the opportunity to put solar collectors on the site. The last one now really reflects a question that was asked us of the first review. What are our materials in detail? And so we've now taken, one question was, are the materials more clearly expressed on the perspectives than on the elevation sheets? And the answer to that question was perspectives. So we've taken the liberty of taking each corner of the building and highlighting what material is used where on the building. We have brick at the base of the building. We have metal and fiber cement panels at the upper portions. This is a relatively high density fiber cement. It looks like a metal panel. It's a very nice product. The panel on the left side shows you brick type 1 is the base building brick. Brick type 2 is the brick that's used on the commercial entries, the 2 restaurants, trying to bring the industrial character to those 2 facilities. And then we have color panels of the cement panels and the metal panels. I understand that the photograph and your computer all renders these colors in a different manner. We have delivered to the planning department actual samples last Thursday. I think it's really nice to see the brick type 1 because it is a gray brick, but it's a variegated gray brick. And when you see it, there are areas where the gray doesn't cover the brick, and brick type 2 is the surface that comes through. So it's a relatively textured surface. It's not a slick, glossy surface. It's a material that combines this Keystone site with the industrial heritage of this industrial triangle. And then it's a material that makes a transition between our building and where we have the brick on the corner of Locust, the traditional brick on the corner of Locust and Vale, and in the center of Vale. So it's a simple, interesting story, we think, that's told on the brick. This is the corner of building 3. So these are the 2 main facades of the building. Again, you have brick at the base, cement panel, metal panel going up, and high density cement panel as you get to the top of the building. I will show a rendering. We've quantified that the base of the buildings all have, as they face Revere Beach Parkway, 20% of the surface opaque area of the buildings is brick. And in fact, we've carried that brick on Vale Street and Locust Street and through the common courtyard street. So basically the podium levels articulated via use of the brick material that runs through. Here is the middle of the street, treated a little differently than building 1. So there's a sense of variety between the buildings, more fiber cement. There's the entry to building 2, aluminum glass storefront, sort of a similar brick number 1. The gray brick is still carried through on the base, but the upper portions of the building are quite different than building 1. This is looking from the main courtyard out to the street. And again, you can see the variety in the buildings. Here you have the accentuated corners of Boston and Vale, and the accentuated corner in the middle of our site that connects to the Greystar development. Again, it's a similar metal, high density fiber cement, different colors, broken up in the less than or not more than 60-foot increments. And then for the most part, brick, but at these accentuated corners, the surface material comes down to create a break in the building. What you see here is the connector that goes from Vale Street to the courtyard. That's the east-west horizontal connector that connects to the north-south private street courtyard. Here is one of the 2 recessed restaurant zones between our 2 buildings, and that is, as I mentioned, the red brick. It's not quite showing up on the rendering the way it should, but these restaurants are intended to be more industrial oriented and begin to make the connection between the new and the interior of the site. And we make that even more pronounced on this end of the building where we have the neo-industrial, either a brew pub, food court, food truck. It's to be determined, but it's a pavilion that's clad in metal and brick and uses that red brick color as well as this corner of the building. So the idea is you get to this far corner and connect deeper into the site, you have a little bit more of the red brick coloration. And then the Keystone site view is coming down Revere Beach Parkway. You have the Shell station, and we have Building 3 fronting across that site, Building 1 in the distance. And this is showing the facade treatment that the requirement on Revere Beach Parkway is to have 20% of the facade brick clad, and we have 24% on Building 3, actually 35% in the opaque area of Building 3 as it faces the other corner. Revere Beach Parkway comes around at an angle, so it's actually fronts on this facade and fronts on this facade. So we felt both of those should honor the design guidelines. And then this facade is actually partly on Boston Street, but again, this piece is visible from Revere Beach Parkway. I do have this slide up because the current plan of the building is to do heating and cooling via a heat pump system, which would be an electric system. But should the pricing turn out to be disadvantageous, or should the utilities not be able to provide sufficient electrical service for the heat pumps, we may go into a gas system, and this brick wall would be concealing the gas meters, which need to be on the street side of the building and accessible to the utility without going into the property. So the brick is handling two things there. The last thing is Mr. Pisano asked us about vents at the last meeting. We would have one vent on each apartment that would handle fresh air intake and exhaust from the apartments. And our proposal is to use a more articulated vent, such as was used at this brick facade apartment building, clearly spaced out and articulated on the facade. But given our facade, they'd be less noticeable, but I just wanted to show a picture of what that vent does look like. So that's the overview of the architectural portion. I want to quickly jump to, just have to screen share here once. All right, so we have the full encyclopedia of drawings tonight, so we can show you anything that a question might arise. So as I jump between disciplines, just excuse I have to just go through about 150 drawings to get the right one. We did submit a photometric plan. Brown and Sardina put this together. Again, one of the design guidelines talks about appropriate lighting, and you saw hopefully in some of those renderings some interesting light fixtures in this common zone. But the photometric plan, I won't go into detail, but it does meet the requirements of the zoning bylaws in terms of lighting intensities. The other thing that we've done in response to requests from the planning board is we've resubmitted all of the landscape drawings, thanks to Brown and Sardina, without the background. So you have a new set of drawings where the existing conditions are not showing through underneath. And that was the only two questions that came up with the site. thank you for your patience on that. I'd like to turn it over to Steve Maturano from Bowler Engineering to address a few of the civil engineering pieces. And just before I do that, I left out one key element. We did mention it last time. I want to reiterate the underside of balconies that you saw on those perspectives would be enclosed. You would not see the underside of the balconies the way was asked about us the last meeting. Steve?
Great. And if you don't mind just continuing to share the screen, I'll just play off of your slides here. So we heard a couple things. Happy to talk through those and any others that might come up tonight. This first slide, it's a little bit zoomed out, but this was a slide that we shared with the fire department. It shows their ladder truck with their dimensions driving through the property. We've reviewed this with the deputy chief to make sure that we're providing the right curb cut widths and radii, and we'll talk about the front entrance in a minute, but also just the path through the property. Want to obviously make sure that works for the fire department. So they were happy with what we're showing here. Obviously, they'll continue to work with us as the building designs develop, but from a site access perspective, they were happy with that street through the middle that accommodates their ladder truck. If you want to go to the next slide, we zoom in a little bit on that front entrance. We've heard a couple of times an interest to get maybe some wider radii coming off of Route 16. So we've now widened those out to a 25-foot radius, which is a pretty comfortable turn, and obviously accommodated the fire truck, which is probably the most critical move to make sure we accommodate. So obviously it accommodates passenger vehicles. A little more comfortable. I think we were showing somewhere in the range of a 20-foot before. So we've increased the radii both coming in and out, which effectively widens that entrance at the street and should allow folks to come in a little easier off of Route 16. Again, we're not trying to, we are trying to implement some traffic calming measures. So we don't want it to be a full slip lane or something that would allow people to come in at a high rate of speed, but we also don't want them coming to a complete stop. And this feels like the right balance there, get folks in a little bit quicker than what we had initially proposed, but still trying to get them to slow down as they come into the site. So off of Route 16 pretty easily there. In the next slide, these are really just, and I'm not testing, this is not an eye test, this chart. This is just the document that we submitted. So we're just put this up to show we've developed a site-specific site utilization plan. This is a combination of construction commitments that we're making initially here, things like hours of operations, street sweeping, erosion control measures, crane locations, things like that, that we are committing to providing those things. Obviously, as the design, as the buildings, get further developed, we get a general contractor on board. They need to add detail to this. So that's really, this is like a blueprint of general contractor information that needs to be provided to the building inspector. Some of it prior to building permit, and some of it between building permit and start of construction. So it's a very comprehensive list here. It includes a couple of items that we've heard from the board. There's a commitment in here to really detail any pedestrian closures we did here. There's commitments to make sure Vale Street is passable by pedestrians throughout construction. So the building inspector will have review of any closures of sidewalks, and obviously there will need to be a comparable pedestrian path provided if and when there are portions of sidewalk to be closed for construction purposes. So there's commitments like that. We know that there's some abutters that have easements through the property. That's even included in the site utilization plan to make sure the general contractor is aware of that, and they're providing a plan to show how the site accommodates the easement rights, not only in the end condition and the current condition, but in the interim condition while they're doing the construction. So they need to be aware of those easement agreements. So we thought this was a good place to sort of formalize that to make sure they're aware of it and make sure they're providing those plans at the appropriate time. And then one of the most important things that this includes is a pre-construction meeting with the building inspector and DPW to introduce the general contractor, introduce the project manager, so the folks that they need to be able to get a hold of if there's an issue during construction, and to review all these bullet points on this site utilization plan and all the additional documents that they provide prior to construction, just to make sure everybody understands what the rules are and who to get in contact with if there's any issues. So those are kind of the three key things that we heard on the civil side, and these documents have been provided to the city with the response that Joel described. And then one other item that we've heard, and maybe it's not a technical item, but there was a comment to make sure the projects are coordinating that are across the street from each other. So the 85 Boston Street wood waste site that is the Greystar development, and obviously this development have a lot of commonality on Vale Street, and when utilities need to be constructed and truck traffic and things of that nature. I am actually involved in both projects. So up till now, I've been a conduit between the two to keep both projects apprised of where each stands relative to design level and anticipated schedules. I'll continue to play that role as things develop. And at some point when general contractors for both parties are identified, then they'll get introduced properly, and obviously they'll take the coordination over from that point as they get into the nuts and bolts of how each one's schedule is aligning and how they can work together to minimize impacts on the public ways. So good coordination just between the two parties that I just wanted to let folks know that we're talking, and we'll continue to talk with them as the projects advance. And that is what I have for civil updates.
Hey, great. Thank you, Steve. I think the byword is comprehensive, and thank you also, Joel, for that review. So just continuing on in our agenda for the evening, Sean Kelly is on the call, our transportation consultant from Vanasse Associates, and hopefully Sean can respond to some of the questions that have come up from the board in prior meetings. Sean?
Good evening, everyone. Again, for the record, Sean Kelly with Vanasse Associates. On behalf of the team, thank you again for having us before you tonight. I think tonight what I'd like to do is two things. I would like to address some of the comments that were raised at the last meeting by board members and give an update as to where we are in terms of responding to some of those concerns and questions that were raised. I'd also like to go over, and I know Carrie Pike is here from Howard Stein Hudson. We are in receipt of the peer review that was conducted by the city's traffic engineer, and we have gone through that. We're in the process of putting together some detailed responses to those comments as well. But I think if it makes sense to the board, I'll start with the peer review, and then we can review some of the lingering questions that have been around since the last couple of meetings. So I won't speak for Howard Stein Hudson, but in my review of their peer review, it appears that we're in general agreement in terms of the methodology utilized to conduct our study and what our findings were. They've signed off on the study area that we looked at, our data collection efforts, the time periods that we analyzed to ensure they're critical with respect to the impacts of the project, the trip generation methodology, how much traffic we'll generate. The parking ratios, the amount of parking we're providing to, try to minimize the use of automobiles and also promote alternative modes of transportation, the trip distribution, and then the results of the capacity analysis. So that the comments received on these items, they were in general agreement. There is some additional information, but I think in terms of the overall approach and the findings they were in agreement. They also concurred with our approach to look at the traffic signals out on Revere Beach Parkway, both at Vale Street relative to some signal timing modifications, and then also over at Everett Avenue with regard to reviewing the safety characteristics as part of the road safety audit. Some of the questions and comments that were raised that we're in the process of addressing. One was to, again, coordinate the design of the pedestrian infrastructure. We are proposing some significant improvements along Vale Street, where today along our frontage there really is no pedestrian accommodations, and to coordinate that with the abutting projects on the opposite side of the street. As Steve pointed out, one of the benefits of this project team is that BOLA is involved in both processes, so we are closely coordinating. We'll continue to do that as the projects advance. With regard to the traffic study, there was one development project that was identified that we did not include in our analyses. So we will be updating that, the future condition analyses to reflect that project. And as I'll get into, we're also expanding the study area slightly to include the intersection that Board Member Pisano had asked us to look at the last meeting. There was some questions and comments raised relative to some of the TDM measures and measures to promote the use of non-SOV travel. There was a request to have a minimum of 5% electric vehicle charging stations within the garage, 5% of the total parking, with the infrastructure in place to upgrade to 15% additional in the future. We reviewed this with our proponent, and they're on board with that, and that will be provided as part of the project. I think as Joel had mentioned earlier, there was a comment to have a commitment to put blue bikes within the project limits, and that's something that we are certainly committed to do. There was a comment relative to unbundling the parking so that, if you get a unit in this development, you're not guaranteed a parking space. Some people that don't want a parking space wouldn't be required to get one. And that will be the case, so the parking will be unbundled from the actual units themselves. Some comments relative to providing a car sharing service within the project, such as Zipcar, to further promote, people that don't want to have their own vehicle. And again, it's something that we certainly are interested in investigating.
Sean, one quick, sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
Just for the record, we will have bundled parking for the affordable units. So 40 units will have bundled parking.
That's right. Good catch. Thanks, Avi. There was a comment that we should provide, transit screens in the lobbies of all three buildings. These are interactive real-time screens that will let you know where the buses are, where the Silver Line bus is, where the commuter rail is, even if there are blue bikes available. So that's something that, again, we're interested in providing as part of the project. Some comments relative to loading, clearance heights within the garage itself to ensure that the required vehicles have the vertical clearance, and then that's something that we've looked at. We expect to have that minimum 12-foot clearance to ensure you can do on-site loading and trash activities within the garage itself. And then, there was, again, we've touched on a little bit, there was some discussions about, construction management. We did try to reach out, and I'll get into this also to your police representative, Sergeant Gaff, relative to some of the issues they've been having in the area with construction-related impacts. We do understand that the Traffic Commission, doesn't want parking on Vale Street related to these activities, and under current conditions, that is a good idea. It's a fairly narrow roadway. It's not well defined. The parking today isn't defined. Certainly under post-development conditions, it'll be a different animal, and it'll be defined with the appropriate striping and signage and what have you. But under today's conditions, it isn't appropriate to have all of that construction activity there. And as Steve mentioned, a comprehensive construction management plan will be developed and submitted to the city for review that shows locations of on-street, off-street parking, measures to promote the use of carpooling and public transportation to ensure you don't have any of the situation that you've had out there recently with respect to parking and the conflicts on Vale Street itself. So that, I think, in a nutshell, is some of the issues we have left to work out with relative to the peer review. And again, we'll be working on that. Expect to have that information back to your consultant as well as the city in advance of the next meeting. When we last met, there were a number of other comments that were raised, and I believe, again, Board Member Pisano, you may have been the genesis of most of them, but there was a concern about 2nd Street and the fact that if the Everett Street, Carter Street area gets congested in the morning, that people may utilize 2nd Street as an alternative means to travel south and access Route 1. We have picked up some traffic count data for that location. We are modeling that intersection now. And as part of our expanded and revised study that would, again, also include the additional background development, we will be incorporating that intersection to address the comments that you had raised. There was a comment to speak with Sergeant Gaff again, and I know we just touched on this about the Vale Street corridor and some of the parking issues during construction. We have reached out a couple of times, haven't been successful in tracking him down. I'm sure he has a lot of other responsibilities beyond this, but we did have a chance to speak with Jay Monty, and he reiterated the concerns that it's really before the corridor gets redeveloped, that's where the real issues are. And again, we'll be working to have that construction management plan to ensure that these issues are dealt with as part of this project. There was some comments relative to that inbound radius off Revere Beach Parkway, making it more of a sweeping maneuver, so it wasn't requiring vehicles to decelerate quite as much on the main line. And again, as Steve walked through, we've increased that radius, not only for a better sweeping maneuver, but also to ensure that we can accommodate emergency vehicles, including the fire truck. So that has been incorporated into the site plan. And then the last piece was to track down some of the ridership information relative to the Silver Line, the ridership today. We did track down some data just recently relative to what that Silver Line ridership was back in the fall of 2019. And in a nutshell, the peak hour loadings in the morning peak hour, which is the heaviest hour at the Chelsea Station stop, were in the order of about 15 loading at that stop per arrival. With the overall ridership getting around 50% capacity, it peaked out as you got to Eastern Avenue, and then obviously dropped as you got to the airport station, and then down to South Station. So based on the latest data that the MBTA has, the capacity is there. They weren't operating at capacity, but we have also reached out to the CTPS and the MBTA again to see if there's some more recent data to further address that comment. But I think it's important to note that, as part of the planning initiatives that were, put in place by both the City of Everett and the City of Chelsea when they were looking at the implications of the Silver Line expansion, it was always envisioned that, that would result in a additional residential development around this station. A lot of the reports that were done were projecting that the ridership could even double due to the residential density that it would result in. So these increases certainly were accounted for. But again, based on the latest data, which was fall of last year that MBTA has published, there was sufficient capacity to accommodate our project, but we are still following up with CTPS and MBTA to see if there's any additional information available in terms of any changes in ridership or any changes in frequency of service moving forward. And that I think is all I had for tonight. Again, we have some additional work to do relative to the peer review, and we will be providing a detailed response to the comments that were raised, as well as any other questions that were out there from the board. Be happy to answer any questions that anyone may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. I also did, just to jump off on one of the things you mentioned about the capacity down there at the MBTA. I spoke to Jay Monty as well, and having been to some of those meetings with Jay that the MBTA held in the run-up to approving the expansion in this area, they recognized that the increased availability of public transportation would bring people, would bring residents. But it's a market cycle. The ridership, the MBTA, the ridership pays for the product. So it's a kind of a symbiotic thing. They knew if they built the lines that residences would come, but they also need the residences to come to provide the ridership. So it really fits the plan. So Jay was very excited about the project, and not to put words in his mouth, but this is, we need people in the seats to justify the investment in the transportation, and that's what our project, a transit-related or transit-oriented project, will do. So thank you for that. And I didn't mean to jump in before any of the board members might have any questions for you on traffic, or frankly, Carrie Pike or anyone from Howard Stein Hudson, I guess is free as well to jump in. But not to linger on that, and certainly if anyone does come forward to any of our team members as we go on and continue in the presentation, please jump in. But following my agenda, I've got looking to hear from Lynn Sweet, our affordable housing consultant. And Lynn went to some detail at our last meeting about the plan and the numbers and the unit dispersion throughout the planned layout of the units. But I wanted to, I think she's with us tonight, and give her an opportunity to fill in anything that might have come to her mind, and certainly give the board an opportunity to come up with any questions, having had the chance to hear her presentation last time and see the materials in detail that were submitted. So Lynn, are you available for a quick overview? Did I not see her? Hey, Lynn, you're muted. Hey, Lynn?
Yeah, sorry, just having technical difficulties. How's everyone doing?
Good, thanks.
Great, thanks, good to see you.
Good. I did go through the presentation slide by slide last time. Honestly, the only thing that's changed was that I fixed an addition error on the rents. So I'm not really there. I don't really have a lot to add from what we went through last time, but I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that anyone has on this subject matter.
Just to take off on the question that Avi had for Sean during his presentation, the unbundling in terms of the making residents in the affordable units pay additional fees for parking. Is that something that is not possible, or is that a standard practice?
The way that I set up the affirmative fair marketing and resident selection plan, each resident was to be assigned, each affordable unit was to be assigned one surface parking space or one parking space. So you can certainly unbundle the parking for market rate residents, but from a fair housing perspective, you do need to provide affordable residents with one parking space. The state is going to have a real issue if you don't allow that.
Okay, and that's just kind of in the grand scheme of things in terms of the our application for an inclusionary zoning special permit. It is of course subject to DHCD approval. So we presented it. I don't know if anyone from the board had any other question, or really that our presentation is complete on that, and the numbers are based on an 800 unit count. So I guess Mr. Planner, Mr. Latanzi, that is to just inquire of our procedural function at some point, and of course through our Chairman Cafasso, we would be asking after any questions are addressed in terms of meeting protocol, to ask that if the board would be comfortable moving toward a vote on that part of our application.
So can I just step in on a process thing? Typically during the planning board process, we do have the draft inclusionary zoning plan approved. The project changes over time. We would certainly be updating the inclusionary zoning plan to reflect those changes relative to either unit count, or if the calendar year changes and income levels change. The state typically looks at the inclusionary zoning plan at the time of building permit. They will want to have the regulatory agreement signed at that time. So I know that there was a concern last week about, well, what if things changes? So I think that it's an approval as to, what's on the table today, the concept, the fact that we followed your rules, understanding that we will need, like other parts of the project, to continue to update as we go down the road.
Thank you. Any questions of the board, of the team?
I just have a couple of comments. That's really all. Did a great job of answering all our questions. Thank you for that. The main entrance looks much better coming off of the Parkway. Thank you for the prints without the old prints underneath. Much easier to read, as I could really follow it much better. Thank you. The utilization plan, you have that all in summation on a piece of paper, but you're going to submit the actual drawing to the ISD. Okay, fine. Traffic, going to leave that in the hands of people much more capable than I guess 2 peer reviews and a lot of engineers out there say it's going to work. Matter of fact, as I read it, it's going to be even better. So that's great to hear. It's going to be a lot of happy people around. The color submittals, great. I like the fact that it looks like the gray is lighter than the original drawings were, I believe. And it's good to see them being lighter because I think it looked, when you came down the Parkway and you looked at buildings straight on, it looked kind of dark, and now with a lighter brick, I think it's going to look much nicer. I would have liked to see more type 2 brick out there, the red, but whatever. And the guidelines are pretty specific, and I think you follow them very well, the city's guidelines. Not much more I can say. I thank you for everything. I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions of this team?
Mr. Chair, I have a couple comments, if you'd indulge me.
Surely, Mr. St. Louis.
Just a couple suggestions based on some other areas in town and different traffic we've seen locally. There's been a request that the traffic driving down Vale Street can be quite fast at times from the parking and traffic department. And it may be worth putting one of our raised brick crosswalks if there's going to be a mid-block crossing from the center plaza that was described a minute ago. Also, we have a similar bike crossing at Air Force Road and Prospect Street, where the bike lane is parallel to the direction of traffic. And the issue has come to light that the right turning movement from Air Force Road onto Prescott cannot see the approaching bike. And it's really highlighted to the city that some sort of bike queue detector or some sort of pre-detection alert system for like an RFB, rapid flashing beacon or otherwise, would be worth investing at that location. And this situation looks very similar to that, where you may have vehicles entering from 2 different paths at the same time, just not realizing who has the right of way in that entrance from Route 16.
Just to respond, Greg, I think that the speed table at Vale or the brick crossing is something that we were thinking of in conjunction with the Woodway site, and I think that that's a great idea, certainly in keeping with the plaza concept that we have. And if we can come up with a system, even a solar powered system that has a bike alert, I think that there's a lot of technology out there that we could pull from. I think that those are totally reasonable.
Yeah, it's probably a camera system at this point, and they're not bad, but I think to say DOT might ask you for it anyway. I don't know how many different bike facilities they have along formal access.
Well, I certainly know that we won't have, at least at the offset of our building 1 project, there won't be that much inbound and outbound traffic, at least on the bike lane that we create, because it dead ends at Boston Street and dead ends at Everett or at the end of the property line. But we certainly hope it continues, and we will certainly put that bike alert mitigation in for the future when everyone's biking.
And I don't know if the private sector realizes this, but DCR formally transferred Route 16 to DOT as of July 1. So even
we heard on the call with DOT, they're super excited about having it.
I'm sure. To that end, you may have noticed that the landscape activities on Route 16 have dropped off from DCR as well. So I would really advocate that if
DOT's already asked.
Somebody was going to. So to the extent any sort of landscaping, of the boulevard and your frontage would go a long way. And we're trying to ask everyone in the corridor to put an extra helping hand out there.
We will certainly do our share.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
If it's okay for you, Mr. Chairman, I had a couple of questions.
Go
This
ahead,
is
please.
Robin Stein from KP Law, we're Town Council. I don't know if we're planning to get to this later in the meeting, but I know there was discussion at the previous meeting and mentioned this evening of an easement and a butters, and I was hoping that the applicant could address the concerns raised at the last meeting about that. And then also, I just wanted to confirm that a draft affordable marketing plan has been submitted to the board at this point on the inclusionary units. There's a lot of paper in this, and for some reason, on the moment, I'm just having a hard time finding it in my files. So those are my two questions. And then just to remind the board also that the public hearing is still open on all of these applications before we would approach any votes. But to the extent that the board is inclined to vote on any part of it this evening, my recommendation would just be that that vote is subject to any and all conditions to be drafted between city staff and town council for the board's final review and vote of the formal decision at its next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I answer the question about the affirmative fair marketing and resident selection plan?
Yes, you can, please.
Sure. So exhibit 3 of the inclusionary housing plan is the affirmative fair marketing and resident selection plan that was prepared by Maloney Properties, who will be the lottery agent.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, if I might address the other issue, not quite as clear cut. Thank you for that, Lynn. As I said at the last meeting, the easements are a matter of public record. Both parties are benefited and burdened by obligations relative to those easements. And being aware of them and understanding them and being committed to honoring them, the rub comes in interpreting those things. Like any neighbor relationship, there are different ideas of what is, what the definition of is, and we're working that out. The parties are in communication. I know that the counsel for the petitioner, the applicant, is in contact with counsel for the neighbors, and that's a long way of saying we know about the easements. The easements are defined. There might be some area of interpretation, but we're committed to coming to a workable solution and being good neighbors to all of our abutters and the rest of the city. And in light of the fact that there's a very close geographic proximity and mutual obligations under the written easements, we'll work through those. In terms of this being an area of concern to the planning board, what constitutes a good site plan and what constitutes a good development, these are matters for the planning board. Issues that limit our ability to do things on our lot, those are matters between the neighbors. So we're not asking for the board to intercede and solve any problems of interpretation of easement rights and obligations, and nor is it appropriate for an abutter to do so in terms of reflecting or commenting on the feasibility and the good planning of this particular project. So I hopefully, Attorney Stein, that answers your question on that. And I really can't go into, I don't know what more to say other than the parties are aware of their special relationship in light of this easement agreement. And we're getting to a mutual understanding and accommodation.
Thank you very much.
Okay. I don't know if there's a more specific answer than that, but that's
Well,
where
when
it's
it
at.
comes down to the easement, I guess it all depends at the time of passing and such, how the easement still stands.
Oh, it's there. Yeah, we recognize it.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, this is Carrie Pike from Howard Stein Hudson, your peer review consultant.
Yes,
Can I ask one question of Mr. Materano about the revised driveway?
surely.
Thank you. I just was wondering, in the revised driveway, is the sidewalk and the new bike path that's crossing the driveway all going to be at the same level? In other words, or is the sidewalk changing grade at the driveway? And Steve, did you understand what I'm asking?
I do. Yeah. The proposal right now is that the pedestrian will be flush across the driveway.
Okay.
Obviously, this is, under DOT's jurisdiction, and we need to get their approval on how that driveway is ultimately constructed. But the idea is to get them up, and we really want to give precedent to the pedestrians and slow vehicles down. I understand the board has some desire to get them in quickly, so we're trying to balance those two, and maybe it's a modified where it's not 6 inches up, but maybe it's 3 or 4 inches up, and we'll work with DOT there. But we want it to be a raised crossing for the pedestrians.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Can we close the public hearing? Robin?
Well, you haven't actually opened it to the public yet this evening, so I just want to make sure there's no members of the public that want to be heard before you close it. And I would only recommend closing it this evening if you are intending to vote. And this would just be on the IZ portion, correct?
On the
not-
affordable housing, yes.
Just on the IZ special permit, you're going to keep the public hearing open on the other two applications.
Yes.
Okay, I would recommend then that you, however you want to do it, that you open public comment for either one or all three of the applications, but that you not close it until you're ready to vote.
We are now open for any public comments that might be out there.
And I don't know if you can see it, Mr. Chair, but I do see one gentleman with his hand up, Marshall Handley.
Mr. Chairman, Marshall Handley, I represent the abutters. I understand Mr. O'Neill's comments, but I would suggest that site control is an essential component of their proof. And at this point, the easements as they exist do not allow the site plan that is before you tonight. It is directly offensive to various easement rights and generally offensive to others. And there is insufficient information on what their mitigation efforts are going to be to allow us to have any discussion or consideration of whether or not an amendment of these easement rights is appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Handley.
Thank you.
We understand what you're referring to, and we are not acting on that this evening, the site plan itself. If we are acting on anything, it is the affordable housing. So,
Understood. I just didn't want to have those.
we understand that we
responded to.
We appreciate your comments, and
Thank you.
take those as noted too. Thank you very much. There again, is anyone else out there that would like to comment? Hearing none, I take it. Mr. Planner, we hear anything else?
I see no one. I'm looking at the chat. I see nothing. Participants, I see nothing.
Thank you. Well, at this time, the chair will entertain a motion to close the public hearing for,
Motion to close public hearing on inclusionary zoning special permit 1690 Revere Beach Parkway.
Second the motion.
A motion has been made and seconded to close the public hearing for special permit and inclusionary zoning for 1690 Revere Beach Parkway.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, through you, just to clarify, because this format's a little awkward for folks, all the board is proposing to close is the IZ special permit application. The other special permit and the site plan public hearings are staying open, correct?
Correct. And it's
Just for folks watching, it gets a little hard
Yes,
to
I
follow.
understand, but it's only for the dimensional special permits and inclusionary zoning. Is
No,
that correct?
not the dimensional special
Not
permit.
dimensional, so okay.
That's what I want to clarify.
Okay,
So
zoning.
you're just proposing to close the public hearing on the IZ special permit, no other part of these applications.
Fine. Then the chair will entertain another motion. We will not accept that motion at the time.
No, I think the motion was fine. I was just clarifying it.
Well, he did have dimensional permits in there. Leo did not?
No, I don't.
No,
Okay.
I can make a motion again, if you please.
No, we haven't voted on it, so would you take your second back?
I'll take the first one back, and just for clarification purposes, I'll make a motion, the favorable action on inclusionary zoning special permit 1690 Revere Beach Parkway.
Thank you.
Second the motion.
Can I add that will just be subject to conditions to be drafted between city staff and council for the board to take a final vote on the actual decision at its next meeting?
You can?
Mr.
Thank you.
Chair, sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt. I believe you were making a motion to close the public hearing first, not take action.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
We're just closing this part of the public hearing. Roll call vote?
Oh, yeah, that's me. Sorry about that. Michael O'Connor,
Yes.
Leo Pisano,
Yes.
George D'Angelo,
Yes.
James Tarr,
Yes.
and Chair Frederick Cafaso.
Yes. A motion that is passed for closure of the public hearing. Now, the chair will not take a vote tonight. Is that right, Robin?
No, hold on. Before we go back, Matt, can I just check with you real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
I had the chair, Leo, Mike, Phil, and James voting.
It is Mike, Leo, George D'Angelo, James Tarr, and the chair, Frederick Cafaso.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we had James not here. Is it Phil? I'm sorry. I thought we had George not here.
George showed up.
Just come in late.
Okay, is he eligible to vote on this one? I thought that he missed the first meeting, so that Phil was voting on this.
I don't think I missed the first meeting, but I came
Okay.
late to this meeting. But I don't mind not voting.
Whatever you feel comfortable with legally. Mr. D'Angelo was not identified as being in the meeting when we opened the meeting.
Yep, so let's have the folks that we identified as voting vote.
Sure thing. Yep. Let me redo the roll.
Apologize for the confusion.
Yep. No. And I'll do it with the proper people. So everyone, Michael O'Connor,
Yes.
Leo Pisano,
Yes.
Phil Mastrocola,
Yes.
James Tarr,
Yes.
and Chairman Cafaso.
Yes. Motion is passed to close the public hearing. Is that correct?
Yes, sorry for the confusion.
No, it makes sense. I know Mr. D'Angelo came in, but he wasn't identified as being part of the meeting.
Okay.
Are we making any motions tonight? Robin?
That's up to you folks.
Okay, the chair will entertain a motion.
Make a motion for continuance.
Well,
Do you want to continue this?
You want to vote on it tonight?
Well, subject to
There
the,
seem to be a lot of open questions, but if we can just stipulate that we can give them a favorable action on the site plan review with conditions.
We're not doing the site plan tonight.
All right, so.
We're just doing the inclusionary zoning. That's it.
You're talking about inclusionary zoning is the next meeting to finalize it, correct?
No, well,
We can vote on it tonight
Fine.
after review of the plan of legal counsel.
well,
Okay.
you can do it one of two ways. You could vote it tonight, subject to the conditions that we're gonna draft and recommend for your final review of the decision, or you can continue it to the next meeting for vote on the final decision. Or however else you want to do it, but those are two options.
I think we need to vote on this tonight. Please. There's a lot coming up the next meeting.
Thank you.
I'll agree with you, Mr. Chairman. We should vote on it tonight.
Just on the IZ permit.
Can we have a motion now?
Just on the IZ correct.
Okay.
Do we have a motion?
Make a motion for favorable action with conditions on the special permit for inclusionary zoning for 1690 Revere Beach Parkway.
Second the motion.
Motion
And
is
with the caveat that you'll approve the written decision at your next meeting.
With conditions, I'm not gonna,
Okay,
there's
thank
so
you.
many, just the word conditions will cover it all.
Thank
Both
you.
parties will have to jump in there.
we have a second again, please?
Yes, it's seconded.
Seconded by Mr. O'Connor.
Yes.
Roll call vote, please.
Yep. Michael O'Connor,
Hold on,
Wait.
before the vote, can we just make sure that motion was clear? Because I just heard a motion for favorable action on the application for the IZ special permit
Oh,
with
motion
conditions.
for favorable action with conditions
On the IZ special
on the
permit.
inclusionary zoning special permit.
Okay, thank you.
alrighty, that motion. Michael O'Connor,
Yes.
Leo Pisano,
Yes,
Philip Mastrocola,
Yes.
James Tar,
Yes.
and Chairman Frederick Cafaso.
Yes,
Wonderful.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members.
Your team. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Great job, Matt.
So, thank you, Mr. Planner. I know we've got some, as much as we covered tonight, there are some things that we would be back before you to further comment on and further provide for the board. Is there anything in specific relative to the issue of the easement that the council brought up? I'm a little bit open to this direction there in terms of what you might like to hear from us. And otherwise, as we look forward to coming back on the remaining matters that we've brought before you in this site plan review, including our special permits on our dimensional relief and parking relief. And I know we've got some alternative height language that we'll be bringing before you, but obviously we would like to come back and with any guidance that you would like to provide us on any of those subjects.
Can I just comment on the easement question?
Please.
So, we've had a couple of meetings now where we've, I think, kind of heard the same thing. Applicants saying, we think we have it covered, the neighbor saying we don't. Would it be possible perhaps to show a plan of where the easement lies on the site and how it is being accommodated by the application?
We submitted that at the last hearing. So you have a full write-up of the easement. You have
Was
the
there a
easement.
plan with that submission or just a
Yes.
letter?
No, there was a letter, a plan, and the actual easement agreement itself.
Can you maybe just forward that to me, or David, if you could send that to me?
Sure,
I
yeah.
don't think-
It's on the city site, but I can pull it off and I'll send it to you.
Okay, I don't think I saw the plan. I've seen the easement and I saw the letter.
And I could be wrong too, because I've certainly seen some circulation proposals, but I'll make sure if those are not in what's been submitted to the city, I will get that to you.
Okay. Because it would just be helpful, I think, to be able to have a better sense of what the the dispute is between the transformers and the design.
Thank you.
Well, Mr.
Thank
Chairman,
you.
on that subject, when it comes time to vote, we need to take our lead from our lawyers, not from the applicant lawyers or from Mr. Hanley. Our lead needs to come from our lawyers saying whether it does or doesn't affect the right for a site plan review. So I'll expect Robin or whoever to tell us yes or no, not their lawyers.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Yeah.
may, I agree with that sentiment. And certainly this is not the first project that's come before the city with conflicting easements or other easements across its property for utilities, access, or otherwise. And the city, either through my office or through the solicitor's office, has often made it very clear to any number of parties that we represent numerous constituents in the city, both in this case, the applicant and the abutters. And we take a strong look at what those easement rights are for all parties and do not, choose a side, so to speak. So we certainly can review those documents and provide the board a recommendation prior to any action.
Thank you.
And has the abutter seen that submission?
I'm not sure, but
Yes.
if you were available to speak, if Robin, if you want to give me a call at any point, I'm more than
Okay.
happy to go through what we've got and what issues we have.
Yep, I'm just, for the board's sake, I'm happy to help move the issue along.
Thank you, Robin. Anything else? Hi, George.
When
Can we
would be,
continue with our meeting?
if this were to be continued, to what date would it be continued?
But I think we'd be interested in coming back for the, if I might, the board's next available meeting, which I think is November
And
10th.
Tuesday, November 10th. Yep.
Is that okay, Matt?
It's
So
okay
if
with
a
me.
motion's made for continuance, we could use that date, November 10th.
Works for us.
Fine. We are continued.
Oh, no, you have to have a motion to continue.
I'll make a
Can I have
motion.
a motion?
Yep, motion
Continue
to,
the public hearings.
Leo?
I'll make a motion for continuing the site plan review and special permit for 1690 Revere Beach Parkway to November 10th, online via Zoom, keeping the public hearing portion open.
And that's 7 PM, Leo?
7 PM. Thank you.
Thank
Robert.
you.
At 7 PM.
second the motion.
Motion has been made and seconded to continue the public hearing for site plan review and special permits for 1690 Revere Beach Parkway until November 10th.
At 7 o'clock.
All right. Roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Michael O'Connor,
Yes.
Leo Pisano,
Yes.
Phil Mastrocola,
Yes.
James Tar,
Yes.
and Chairman Cafaso.
Yes. Motion is continued.
Until the 10th.
Okay.
Thank you,
everybody.
Thank you very much. Good night now.
Good night, all. Happy Halloween.
Next order of business.
Right.
All
Planning.
right. The next order of business, item number 3, meeting minutes, July 20th, 2020, September 14th, 2020, September 21st, 2020, and October 3rd, 2020.
13th.
13th. October 13th.
13th, 2020. That was close. Jeannie, did you submit these minutes? Jeannie, you're on mute.
Deanie?
Still on mute.
Still on mute.
Still on mute.
Does anybody have the minutes?
Shane,
There she
you
is.
there?
You're
Yep.
unmuted now.
So Shane said he submitted July 20th. Did he give them to you guys? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Was that again?
July 20th. Shane said he provided you guys July 20th. I don't have them. Did you guys get copies?
I have to plead the fourth here. I don't know, or the fifth, one of the numbers. I don't find it anywhere.
I was
I got a
working on-
copy of July 20th.
Yeah, I was working on the other three. You'll have them for next meeting, but he said July 20th, he provided you guys.
That should have came in on October 13th. That's when I received it by email.
You have it?
All right, I'll have to look at work if you don't have them.
Jim,
Does
do you
anybody
have-
else get them?
I have a copy of the minutes from July 20th.
Well, you have to, if everybody else doesn't have them, we can resend them out tomorrow.
Yeah, then we can vote on all of them at the next meeting.
Yeah. Jim, when did he send it?
Should have been October 13th at some point.
All right, I'll look tomorrow.
Having none? Any
Everything's
staff
good there.
communications?
Staff communications, Greg, do you have anything?
No,
Yeah, I
thank you.
did get it. I got the July 20 minutes.
Well, if you guys didn't get to review them, we should wait.
All right, so
The other,
Greg,
I had one other question though, just so you guys know, November 10th is a Tuesday. Are you guys okay with that? I
It
think,
is?
yeah,
November
and
10th.
everything,
Yeah, you said Tuesday when you continued it.
okay.
Okay. No- So our next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, November 10th. Is that correct?
Yeah,
All right. Having none, Chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Second motion.
Motion is made and seconded to adjourn. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
anything for you?
It's actually for Robin.
It's actually, it's for the open meeting law,
Okay.
not for me.
Michael O'Connor,
Yes.
Leo Pisano,
Yes.
Philip Mastrocola,
Yes.
James Tarr,
Yes.
and Chairman Frederick Cafaso.
Yes, we are adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Robin.
Come by and get some candy.
George, you there, George? George?
Yeah,
George? Where are you, George?
He's there.
I'm here somewhere.
Right
There
at the
he is.
George? George, you stop by tomorrow morning?
I will do that, yes.
I have the things you want.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
They'll be in the
George.
back room in case I'm not there, okay?
Okay.
Take care all.
Thank
Good
you.
night. Good night.
Good night, all.